Hello and welcome to IdeaFire TV, episode number 4. Today I am joined by my good friend and guest, Alan Gregerman, who is a worldwide innovation consultant and owner of VentureWorks. Welcome to the show. We are going to be talking about innovation, business, and the future of AI. So let's get started. So Alan, you've written many books about innovation. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved in innovation and how it led to a career?
Sure, that would be great. The interesting thing that led me to innovation was the fact that I actually was always fascinated as a child in geography. Sure. And I have a globe here for you to see. And I was always interested in places. And so I would regularly look at atlases and point to places and ask my parents if they knew what was going on in those places. My parents rarely did because they didn't have the luxury of traveling.
Sure.
But what I realized was that there are fascinating people and fascinating ideas everywhere, and I was always quite curious about ideas.
Sure.
Fast forward, I actually have a PhD in geography, and as opposed to studying business, even though I'm a business consultant, I was kind of keenly interested in figuring out kind of why different ideas happen in different places.
Sure.
And why some ideas spread and others don't. I also realized while I was working on my doctorate in geography that I hated being a doctoral student. At the same time, I was volunteering as a business consultant, helping entrepreneurs in Detroit keep their businesses alive.
Interesting.
What all of them needed was not only to connect with customers, but to figure out how to be innovative in ways that mattered to their customers. So I started to help them think about kind of strategies for being different and more compelling. And that led me to starting to think about innovation. That was like 35 years ago.
Fascinating.
At least 35 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the cool thing is if you get everybody who's watching to realize that there have been like 7,000 cultures on Earth during the history of human habitation, and all of them have known something remarkable. And so if we could know more about what they know, we'd be way more innovative.
So Alan, you've worked with some of the most innovative companies in the world: Google, Raytheon, Mercedes-Benz, Northrop Grumman. Can you talk a little bit about how your definition of innovation has changed over the years or evolved after working with these types of companies?
Sure, that'd be great. And there's 3 things I'd like people to think about, and then I'd like to give a little bit of context for why I think they're important. So here are the 3 things to think about. The first thing is innovation is really about figuring out how to deliver new and compelling value to whoever you serve.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter what company you're in. You need to understand the world of your customers and where that world is going and try and figure out how to be more meaningful and more compelling to them. So innovation can be all different types of things. It can be products, services, and solutions.
Sure, good point.
But it can also be customer experiences. It can be a different business model of how we get to customers. So I want people to think about the simple idea that innovation is really about doing something different that actually matters to those we serve.
Sure.
The second thing I want them to think about is innovation is really about putting things together that have never been put together before.
Yeah.
I like to talk about in my books a notion I have called the 99% rule. And the 99% rule is simply the idea that 99% of all new ideas are based on someone else's thinking or something that someone finds in nature or the world around them.
Sure, emulating.
So the idea is not that we have to rack our brains to come up with something totally new. The idea is that we have to look at all the brilliant things that are around us and use those as the starting point combined with what we know for creating greater value. And then the third thing I want people to think about is oftentimes innovation occurs because I take 2 things that were kind of disparate, that people hadn't thought about putting together, and I combine them. So those things are the things I'd like people to think about. But for all of your audience, it's really about how do we create greater value for the people we serve.
So Alan, many breakthroughs stem from identifying unmet needs. How do you figure out what your audience or customer wants and help them innovate or introduce new products to the market?
Okay, that's a great question. But think about it in a slightly different way, and that is almost all innovation, at least innovation in business, occurs either from unmet needs or from us anticipating the needs that a customer will have.
Sure.
Now, to get you to think about that, I'd love to go back in time like 145 years.
Okay.
And so
Let's
I
do
have a
it.
light bulb here.
Yeah.
And so think about Thomas Edison. And so Thomas Edison's kind of famous not for this kind of energy efficient light bulb, but he's famous for light bulbs. And so he created a lot of other inventions, or we think he created a lot of inventions. It's a gray area. But he's known most for creating the light bulb, and that really revolutionized kind of the way we worked and lived and did all kinds of things.
Sure.
But more important than him creating the light bulb was that the light bulb generated remarkable innovation because it required buildings, homes, offices, factories to be electrified.
Right.
And once outlets went into the walls, then suddenly all kinds of innovators who thought about unmet needs, or needs that people clearly had, but they had no way at all to meet them, decided to be creative. The best way to find out about unmet needs is to actually talk to people who are customers. And if we can't do that necessarily, we can wander around our town or someplace else, just looking to see what the pace of change is all about and how people are kind of behaving or acting differently or looking for things in different ways. To go back to the kind of Edison idea of the wall having an outlet is we have a lot of Edison-like inventions today. The internet for sure. The internet allows us to think about all kinds of needs that people have and a new way to drive them, whether it's the Internet of Things or simply getting information to them. AI, I think we'll talk about that later,
Sure.
is another incredible platform. The cloud is an awesome platform.
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the services we can provide because we don't have to be responsible for housing them.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. Drone technology. We used to think of drones as like kind of a device used to drop bombs. And in fact, we see the war in Ukraine as drones being a big part of it. But drones have all kinds of other purposes.
Absolutely.
And so drones become a platform. So what happens is people think about needs other folks have. They think about all these platforms that now exist. And they think about whether to use those technologies or those ways of envisioning a different world. And then they create ideas tied to the needs that they're finding or the needs they anticipate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like these platforms are the breeding grounds for innovation.
Well, yeah, they make it possible for
Sure.
so many people.
Sure.
Because, I started talking about this whole idea of the 99% rule a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And basically, they get us halfway there.
Right.
Because they are a major kind of idea or innovation that somebody's put out there that gives us a canvas for creating anything we want to create.
Yeah, it's really beautiful when you put it that way. One of the coolest things I've seen for drones are the bees. The little microscopic bees they can use to basically create like a hive mind so that they move together and they can pollinate fields of crops basically on a certain time. They can identify, the state of the flower, how often it needs to be pollinated. So I thought that was one of the coolest practical uses for like micro drones,
Right.
which I think are going to be much more prevalent in the coming days. We're used to large size drones or like, in certain conflicts, very large drones, but I think we're going to start seeing a lot more microscopic drones that are doing things, we may not even see with the human eye, but really fascinating
That's cool.
applications. So as we both know, failures are inevitable on the path to innovation. Can you discuss with us a notable failure that provided some deep insight or ultimately led to successes and how that transpired?
Sure. Let me give one that's an example of something I worked on, and then one that's something that I and probably most of your audience experienced.
Sure.
So the one that I think about is an exciting project we did a number of years ago when a major pharmaceutical company was asking us if we could help them figure out how to reduce the cost of packaging their products worldwide. Now, it turns out they wanted to do it to reduce cost. Lots of companies today are doing it because they want to reduce their environmental footprint. So we see lots of products that either have less packaging or no packaging at all. But this company asked us to come in, and they had actually screwed up a lot in trying to do it. Now, they hadn't really screwed up, but what they'd done is they tried to think in kind of a traditional way about packaging. They tried to think about materials. They tried to think about how to make those materials still strong, but have less content to them. And so that was all well and good, but it wasn't kind of the reframe that I want people to think about.
Sure.
I love people to think about every time you have a problem, is there a different way to understand the problem? What I did was I took the team of researchers, slightly against their will, to the Reading market in Philadelphia. The Reading market is kind of a big urban market. And I said, here's what I'd like you to do. We're going to go around to a bunch of the stands, mostly produce stands, and I'd like you to actually buy, I gave them a small budget, I'd like you to buy every item of produce that actually comes in its own packaging and protects itself. And so they were buying bananas and oranges and grapefruits and pomegranates, which are remarkably strong and durable. And we took all of these back, and then we took them apart, and we kind of analyzed why they worked really, really well, and allowed their product to be transported from all around the world to end up in Philadelphia.
Sure.
The result was that we actually came up with packaging that used more natural products and turned out to be cheaper, and eventually saved them over $150 million a year.
Wow.
Now, I only wish I got a percentage of that, but that's one that I'd like you to think about.
Sure. Wow.
Let me share another idea that's kind of interesting, and I think a lot of your viewers are going to resonate with this. And so I've brought here my Airbnb unit. It's not exactly an Airbnb unit. I think it was one of our daughter's kind of playhouses, or a little bit of a playhouse. But think about Airbnb. So what is Airbnb today? It's actually the largest hospitality company in the world. Airbnb today has over 6 million listings of places around the world you can stay, some more remarkable than others, but 6 million places. How did Airbnb start? Airbnb started when a group of guys were going to a design conference in San Francisco and were lamenting the fact that either hotels were not available or they couldn't afford the price of a hotel, and they decided to couch surf with a friend. Their initial idea for the business was that could they create a business that was a couch surfing business? Not a lot of upside. They then decided suddenly that there were more than just couches that people might be willing to make available. People were willing to make available rooms, entire apartments, entire homes. Yeah. That was kind of a cool idea. And so the first start of it, an idea that was okay, got them to think that's not really a winning idea, and they created a different idea. Similarly, for the folks who are watching this, I'd love them to think about the idea that often our first idea is just the starting point on the road to being remarkable. And we have to be open to saying, even when we come up with an idea that we think is pretty darn good, we have to be open to saying, okay, I've started to think about this. Could I do even better? Sure. What if I blew the roof, to use my Airbnb
Yeah,
example?
I love that example.
What if I blew the roof off of this idea? Yeah.
The innovation landscape changes almost every minute. What technologies or emerging trends do you see coming that will change the way we conduct business or work with customers, etc.?
So I think you want to think about technology for sure, but that's not all we should think about. Sure. We should also think about the fact that customer preferences are a moving target. We should think about the fact that we can use, often through technology, or create different business models that will be different. But I try and pay attention to the world around us. So let me share a few ideas. Sure. There are lots of ideas, sure, but let me share a few that I think are particularly compelling. One that comes to mind is personalized medicine. So imagine that we'll have the ability in a generation or two, based on understanding your DNA, to actually target kind of medicine or care or treatment to you if you have any disease, even a rare disease. That's a really hopeful thing. Frustrating for people now who have a rare disease, right, but we're starting to make progress and we're seeing the initial clinical trials. But the whole idea of personalized medicine, that knowing who I am or you are, can enable healthcare providers to provide medical care to us. So I'd love to think about that. Trends are, in terms of kind of customer preferences, the biggest one I'm sure that most of the people watching this have seen. COVID changed the world, and certainly the world of work. So if I didn't have to be at a workplace, I wasn't in retail or distribution or working at a hospital or a bunch of other places, I could actually kind of work anywhere. The fact that I could work anywhere has changed people's expectations, especially young people, about what the world of work should look like. It's now an old notion that I go to work every day, hang out with my colleagues, get mentored, do whatever I do,
Right.
meet them at the coffee pot. But I don't want to come into work all the time. I want to kind of work differently. And so I think that's a kind of compellingly important thing to think about. AI. So AI is changing all the time. I
Sure,
mean,
sure.
I'm not a power user, but I'm using ChatGPT all the time. I'm finding out some of its strengths and some of its weaknesses. I'm encouraged by the fact that I'm still more clever than a bot, but
Sure.
whatever. Yeah,
Sure.
so there are all kinds of things that are happening. And I'd simply like everybody to be paying attention to the world around them, seeing how these things are used, seeing which ones are valuable to them. I even think, in a way, it's kind of an odd thing, but I even think of social media as actually being really a good predictor of kind of where the world is going that helps us to understand what targets we need to hit.
Sure, absolutely. So glad you brought up AI. And every time we look at the news, there's another article about artificial intelligence or ChatGPT. We know it's rapidly changing how business processes are conducted, efficiencies, and just creative applications that we've never seen before. How do you distinguish between human-centric innovation and AI, and what's more important, and why do you think so?
Okay, no, that's a great question. And I have to admit, if people haven't figured out already, that my bias as an innovation consultant is I really love humans. I think humans are like awesome. And I think humans are really creative, and I'm excited by all the ideas that humans come up with. So having said that, I'm starting to use AI and ChatGPT, and I'm starting to test the bounds of it for the work that I do.
Sure.
Ultimately, I believe the really creative work is still going to be done by humans. But I believe a lot of the routine, I don't want to call it grunt work, but a lot of the
Sure.
stuff
Yeah.
that right now we're a little bit nervous that it's going to displace. But a lot of the work that probably humans over time aren't going to want to do is going to be done by AI.
Me neither.
I think humans are the starting point for us thinking creatively. AI then gives us the tools to do some homework tied to our hunches and the tests we want to make. And then we take some of those ideas and we refine those ideas again using human creativity. But what AI can do is it can do a massive amount of stuff in a really short time.
Sure.
Let me give you an example. I mean, one that I read recently, which was kind of shockingly cool, or I don't know, scary to me, was the folks at Carnation have been trying to reach out to all the people who've inquired about cars. Now, I don't want to get a generic message from a big organization like Carnation or Hilton or Mercedes-Benz or whoever. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But they had the ability to kind of go through all the data they had that came in from people inquiring about cars and send 1.3 million customized messages in a very short amount of time.
Wow.
Imagine a human trying to do that.
Yeah.
Imagine a human not wanting to do that.
Right.
Now, here's another example. The typical TSA worker at an airport is going to look at 3 million scans during the course of a year. And what are they looking for? They're looking for a needle in a haystack, right? They're looking for the 1 or 2 or 3 bad actors who are trying to sneak something through.
Yeah.
If we can train AI to look at these screens, we can take these people away from having, now I don't want to disemploy TSA workers, and I love TSA. I'm not going to say anything bad about them.
Sure.
But imagine if we had a way to actually let computers who would not get distracted or would not get bored or tired or need another Mountain Dew. Imagine we had a way to actually get them to scan, and we could train them in all the things we were looking for. And then imagine, in fact, because threats change all the time, they could do an even better job because we could train them quickly. They could look at those 3 million scans and probably be way more accurate.
Sure.
So I think a lot of things that are important to us that are more routine, we should actually be excited that over time AI and machine learning are going to help us to be able to do. And a lot of the things that really require humans to say, at the best of being human, what's a creative and awesome idea? I think we should leave those for humans. And we should actually train every human to be way more innovative, creative, eager to learn, try new things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I read a fantastic quote that said, AI won't take your job. Someone using AI will take your job. I think that was a really fascinating quote. Also, I love the example you used of the TSA scanners because I'm seeing a lot of medical applications for AI now too, because they're putting X-rays, and people who get a lot of X-rays every day, they can send through an artificial intelligence bot, and it can identify, oh, this is compound fracture, this is a hairline fracture, and like almost triage, like this person needs to be seen right away, this person it's not broken. So I think, like you said, those types of tasks where it's somewhat repetitive, will be fantastic applications. And I mean, some of those jobs where you're taking something, placing it over here, or screwing this in there, RPA, robotic process automation, where a robot can do that. The most prevalent example is vehicles, right? You see robots making cars. They punch a door in there. They put these pieces there. It's a finite kind of movement that can be used to program an AI. So I think that's very fascinating.
I actually have my recyclable water bottle that I use all the time. I just fill it up when there's water available. Do I want to pay a premium for somebody to create a box? I think these boxes are actually Tetra Pak, a great Swedish company, inventions, but I don't need water in a box. So this is an idea in search of customers.
Sure.
It's not meeting an unmet need. It doesn't create water where there is none. It creates a box where there is not one needed, I think. And so I think some ideas are really marketing ploys, let's be honest.
Sure.
And so what I'm always looking for are ideas that actually matter to people or businesses, as opposed to somebody who just figures there's a short window, let's actually be clever. And I don't want to say that started with the pet rock. I mean, many of you will be vaguely aware that somebody came up with the idea that people who didn't want to take care of a pet should actually just have a rock as a pet.
Safer.
I'm not sure that's an enduring idea. I don't know that people in a new generation are getting rocks and kind of taking care of them. Yeah.
You've written several books about business and innovation, and I know you're working on a fourth. So I'd love to give you a chance to tell our viewers, what those books are all about, and also this new book that you have coming out.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Yeah, no, so I've been writing about and thinking about different ways to inspire people to unlock their genius, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. And so I like to think that each of the books that I write gives people a different window to thinking about how they can be remarkable. So I brought copies of my books, and so I'd be glad to share.
Yeah.
And so
I love the artwork too. The artwork is fantastic.
Well, I was lucky enough at the time to meet this guy, James Yang, who's a remarkable artist based in New York, who was kind enough to do covers for me. So the first book I wrote was a book called Lessons from the Sandbox, and it had a very simple idea, and it may be particularly relevant now to a bunch of your viewers. It's a book about what we can learn from small children, about how to be more innovative. And so when our kids were young, I was passionate about kind of paying attention to them, and I realized a lot of things that they did were vital to adults and organizations, but things that adults didn't do very much. Kids were more curious than adults were. Kids had a sense of wonder about things. Kids used play as the way that they'd learn things, and we don't play very much in companies or organizations. So that was really the first one, Lessons from the Sandbox. The second book was, I talked a little while ago about the idea of the 99% rule. that we literally can be more innovative by finding ideas that other people have already thought about. And so I wrote this book called Surrounded by Geniuses. And it's a book about what we can learn from other cultures, other walks of life, other disciplines, what we can learn from nature about how to be innovative. And so here it's really kind of a whirlwind tour of kind of brilliance around the world and challenging people to think about how to get out of the box of thinking about kind of the opportunities and the challenges they face. Sure. Think about this. Most people, when faced with a problem, tend to be very industry specific. They either say, what do we know, or what do our best competitors know? Often our best competitors in our industry aren't particularly remarkable at something. Right. And so the idea of stretching beyond our industry to look more broadly in the world is important. The last book that I wrote is a book called The Necessity of Strangers. I love this book. Well, actually, I love all my books, but I love this book in particular because this is a book truly about what we can learn from just people who are different than us. Sure. So while I talk about all different aspects of life and Surrounded by Geniuses, in this book I talk specifically about trying to connect with people who are different than us, how we do it and what we can learn from them. Sure. The idea is, and I joke with people, but you know, if I were to go on your Instagram page or your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page, what I generally find is most of the people you're connected with are a lot like you. What I want you to do is to have kind of a broader network, because you're only as creative as your most creative friends. Sure. And so the reality is, if everybody that you associate with is in your industry thinking about the stuff that you're thinking about, you can't win. Yeah. So this book talks about how we deliberately go out and find people who are different than us, and how we allow serendipity to make connections that we then turn into something more, turn into learning opportunities and opportunities to innovate. So those are the 3 books that I have out there. They're available wherever thoughtful books are sold. And I'm currently finishing a book, and the book is all about the power of being ignorant. Now, that's kind of an interesting and counterintuitive idea. But the idea that people typically have is the smarter you are, the more expert you are, the more likely you are to be successful. The reality is, the more expert you are, the more likely you are to be incrementally better at the things that matter to you. The more ignorant or open to thinking about something that you don't know a lot about, the more open you are to it, the more likely you are to see it in a different light than people who've always thought about that topic, and the more likely you are to create a breakthrough.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Bringing all your incredible props and talking to us about innovation. It's been really wonderful talking to someone who's as passionate about innovation as I am.
Okay, great. Well, no, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted that you're doing this. I look forward to seeing the other programs in your series. And if people want to reach me, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, you know? What is the best way to reach you? Is it email? Is it on your website?
Yes, connect with me on LinkedIn or any other social media that you like.
Thanks for tuning into this episode today, guys. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Alan Gregerman. If you have comments you want to drop or ideas for future episodes, please let me know. You can email me at tv@ideafire.com. Take care.